Bottom line, though, the total capital budget broken out by funding sources across the bottom, all of that again equates to $11.5 million as we currently stand today.
Councilor Swain.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to touch on the 80 acres, the 75,000. I remember the discussion a month ago. I think I'd like to be clear on what exactly we're looking at doing there. I think there was a bit of ambiguity around that discussion, and I'll say some concern from administration around that. So I wondered if you could, in the essence of clearing up the lines of communication, what is that 75,000 gonna get us essentially?
Paul, do you want to weigh in, or do you want me to?
The administration's understanding of the 70,000 is to have a look at what we can do with that kind of money. The direction that council had tossed out was essentially put a fence around it, some area in a park, and use it as a multi-use facility. But that was it. That's all we got from that budget workshop.
That's my understanding, and we haven't explored in any detail at this point. We're waiting to see if this council's direction is still to proceed in this way. So.
Yeah, so I want to be clear. Does that $75,000 get us the potential fence and the potential approach, or does that just get us that study to look at what could potentially be there?
I would say the 75,000 would not be able to sufficiently fence the entire 80 acres, to be honest, without getting a direct quote. But that's a lot of fence line to run. So.
Yeah. So I guess my ultimate question there, thanks for that build-up, is I don't know how, I can't remember how we landed on 75, if that's the right number. What I don't want to do is provide you a budget that's not suitable for what we're looking for, or maybe too much from what you actually need. And so, we had this occurrence with one of the recreation parks last year. I'd hate for you to come back and say, well, we could have done this, but we only had 75, so we couldn't go that extra mile, I guess. So, and I was putting you in a tough spot to say, without knowing what you can actually do, you don't know how much we can, how much you actually need from us. So, is this a case where you can use that 75 as a placeholder? You're going to go out and do that investigation. You're going to come back, and at some point, maybe you say to us, hey, look, if you want to spend an extra 50, then you can get X, Y, and Z. Is that, or do we need to wait for a whole year budget process to go back through this? I'm just trying to get that understanding. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm comfortable with leaving it at 75 and let us look into it, see what the options are, and if there is more money to do something, maybe to enhance it. From what we can see with 75,000, we could bring it back. We can maybe look for some opportunities in some other projects. There could be some savings we could realize. I'm not sure at this point. It's tough to say without getting a clear direction on what we're going to do there. Yeah. To be honest.
So with that, so you say you don't have clear direction, and I would agree with that. We haven't provided that. How do we have that discussion? Do we wait until the budget gets approved before we go? We can have that discussion, or I want to make sure that. If we're providing $75,000 as part of this pay-as-you-go piece, that it's achieving what we're hoping to achieve. So do we look to see when we pass the budget, if it's still in there, then we sit down and have a conversation about what we want that to be, or do we have that now? Have we already had that, and I'm not sure where the line is here. So thoughts on the best way to make sure that we're both setting ourselves up for success there.
Well, if I'm understanding correctly, the intention would be to fence some portion of it, yeah, and see what you could use it as an open space, or whether it was an off-leash area or something along those lines. I would hazard to say to do anything with, I understand it's agricultural land right now, the stubble field, sure, that's going to require significant earthworks to make that a proper, yeah, rec space, to be honest, if it was looking at a playing surface or something like that. So, off-lease pressures are obviously well known, and that's a consideration in that area. But 75,000, you could certainly fence a portion of it. Okay. We just haven't looked at it in great detail because, like I said earlier, to be honest, I wasn't clear 100% on what we want to do with that space at this time. So I don't know if that's the right number or not, to be honest. I know that's not a great answer, but it's my honest answer.
That was my recollection of the conversation, is figure out a way. Is there a spot where we can fence it and see if we can at least have access to it, and maybe I'll defer if anyone else has a different opinion. But what you're sharing was definitely aligned with where I was thinking the $75,000 could go towards. So that's good. But if others had other thoughts on what they want to see out of that, I'd encourage conversation now. If we're good, then we can move on. But this was one of the sticky ones where I wasn't quite sure exactly what we're getting for that 75K.
Thanks. I'll just weigh in here. I had one question around this too. One of the lingering pieces was any agreements that we had. Do we have an agreement that precludes us from accessing this as the landowner this year? I know administration needed to go back and look into that even, because that would further temper expectations as well. So if you don't know, that's okay. I still think that's something we have to, temper our expectations with as well. Is, do we have an agreement that actually doesn't have us having access to this land this year because, we have a previously agreed that we have an agreement in place, right? So I don't know if this administration knows that yet or not.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that.
Yeah, and that's okay.
We
It's
currently
just-
have an agreement.
There is an
For sure we
agreement, but I
do,
don't know
but
if
what
we
is
get
the
out of it.
timing and all that kind of stuff, right? So, that's just another piece. So I got Councillor Hendricks and then Councillor Barnard.
Right, so thankfully, with the budget process and the workshop, we have video, we have tape of the conversation. It's probably even better than having a stenographer or recorder doing it word by word, so we can get back into that discussion there. My recollection of it, after you review the video, will be, I think, we said, let's see how far 75 will take us. Let's see how much fencing we can get done. Let's see how much seeding we can do to create a bit of a seeded area. And certainly we're not looking at doing a full-blown earthworks process. We're not doing stormwater management. We're not doing sanitary. None of that.
Yeah.
Just a good old farmer doing a seed package, and then we need access.
Yeah.
And that's as far as we go. In fact, there was some talk about maybe some gravel. I suggest don't even need to do that. If you get, hard field,
So there's a way you go.
yeah, I can tell you my folks played parking lot for the Pro-Am at Whittier year after year with their farm. People just parked in the fields. Nobody got stuck. Everybody left. There's no issue. So, that's where I thought that the conversation was. So that's where I like to keep this.
And perhaps a gate to control that
Yeah.
access, I believe, was also one of them in that same piece. So, yeah.
Yep.
Councillor Barnard.
On the other item, the one just about that, the park, one of my questions is around something I saw, and I can't find it right now, but in the document somewhere, I think I saw that playground equipment maintenance for the entire city was $50,000 a year. Does that ring a bell? Because it seems to me this is high. If this is for one park, and 50,000 is for all of the parks.
Yeah, that 50,000 is something we budget operationally every other year for just ongoing maintenance of playgrounds. So it wouldn't be replacing
There's no new
the entire
replacement.
playground.
So no other parks are going to get any replacement equipment this year.
It would only be as required.
But at this point, we don't, like, it's just, I think there ought to be a better system than us kind of throwing out one park. I mean, I like the idea that we didn't put enough in there in the first place, and we're fixing that, but is there something in the works then to rectify this in the future so that we are not one-offing it, so that there's replacement as it comes due and
Yeah,
enough money to do that?
You would typically look at the playground when it's installed and what the life cycle of that equipment is, for sure. That would be a capital item at that time, but we do budget operationally some maintenance, because there's always things to repair ongoing, whether it's graffiti removal or nuts and bolts, whatever the case may be, that we do every other year.
But
So
no other replacement budget or reserve that we could take that 30,000 or whatever we need from it. It just seemed like the numbers seemed high compared to what you have in a regular budget. Granted, it's new equipment, but I don't know, that just seemed out of whack to me in terms of the comparison of what's,
you don't get a lot for 30,000 of playground equipment these days.
well, and you don't get left for 50,000 for the whole city. So it just didn't make sense. So I'll take you on your word if you think that's what we need for that, but it seemed to be one of the other is out of whack is what I think.
Yeah, I think it's hard to compare those two things though, because the one is to buy stuff and the other is to repair things. And the repair things part of that is the 50 that was put in here that is every other year in the 5-year look forward, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, the whole next year 50 and then a whole like 50.
That's right.
So whereas this was like $30,000 to put some more things in there. So I don't think you can directly compare those.
No, because that maintenance also goes to whether it's pea gravel or wood fiber for the base or a berm barrier. There's a lot of different things that have to be touched up from time to time, so.
You would
Right
agree
throughout
that
the city.
this part, though, in terms of our standards, does require that investment in addition?
Well, this would be for enhancement of more equipment, that's my understanding of this project. Because it's a brand new park.
Yeah.
Well, because I still go back to, with this particular line item, the report when we originally put the original equipment that was in there, and there was a certain amount of space that we had. I remember being told that what's there is the space we have. Has anybody ever gone back and looked at that to see if truly we can actually add stuff to this, or we're going to be way outside of our norms in terms of
My understanding is
setbacks?
you can add there, there's nothing saying that you can't. It's a pocket park, which is compared to other pocket parks in the municipalities, it's the right size for what they call a pocket park in terms of 0.25 acres. So it is exactly what it is. There is space to put more equipment there. It's just, is that the right decision? That's the question.
But there's no regulation or local rule that we have that says the park has to be X amount of meters from somebody's back fence.
No, not my understanding. Unless planning could help me with that one, I don't
I
believe
still
there is.
remember having this conversation.
No more restrictions.
Yeah, take it back to the Colonial Baseball Diamond, and I think you heard this message, but I just want to get it on the record here, that there is more than just one ball sport, and making sure that when we build this thing that it is flexible enough to provide the suitability for all the ball sports here in the community, things like movable mound and all that sort of stuff. So did you want to touch on that just to confirm that's what you heard and that's what we're getting?
I have heard that both from council members as well as the public and already. So that's something we are talking about as far as what can we do, and not just building it for one particular age group or one particular sport, if you will. So definitely that's on our radar to look at. Yeah.
Thank you.
The second piece that I had around the baseball diamond, but not necessarily that baseball diamond that was brought to me since the budget was approved and this amount was earmarked, was just the current status of some of our dugouts maybe needing some more attention. We didn't hear about any refurbishment or any improvements for those. I bring it forward now as an item for administration to have a look at and consider for future, for sure.
I heard that as well during one of the open houses, so it's something we've talked about internally, and if there's something we can do with the existing operating budget, we'll look at that for sure.
Yeah, thank you. See any more comments? I guess we can continue on.
Just looking at capital project funding as it existed before we started with the budget, and then after considering all the proposals that are currently in the budget. Left-hand side of the column here, or the page, shows you the before picture. So we had about $20 million in funds available for capital. Once we factor in the proposal for 2020, you end up at about 11.3. Of that, there's approximately $4.8 million in grants available. We take our capital reserves from 7.8 down to about 4.2. Offsite levies essentially stays the same, and then pay as you go. You see it go from $512 to $8,000. Just a point here of clarity, the 512 would be coming in again in 2021, as it is funded from the tax levy in our base budget. So every year we get $512,000 in that category to spend.
Okay, so this is what I wanted to see because I want to have a look at this. I was actually quite concerned when council decided to fund our road renewal program from reserves. And so here, black and white, $1.6 million that's coming out of reserves really drains it. So I'm putting it back out on the table. We have almost $5 million in grants between MSI and federal gas tax. Then we fund that road renewal program at 1.6 grants, because that's what those grants are for, rather than drain down our reserves and take that away. So I throw that out on the table for council's consideration. I think it
was a bad choice to take it out of reserves. I think we should use the grants for what they're for.
You looking for comments on that, Councillor Swing?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the discussion, I think we asked for a recommendation from administration, and the recommendation came back and said reserves is the right place to do that. So I would take it from your direction on that. Happy to have the conversation. So maybe I'll leave it there. I've got a question about a gas tax in a second, but my understanding was that, yes, we asked for a review, and your recommendation was that this is something that should be funded through that line item.
That was my recollection as well, just looking for comment.
Yeah, definitely. Philosophically, again, renewal programs, we should be looking after existing infrastructure, should be planning for that. The reliance or the use of a grant to do something like that, as we've seen and experienced over the last number of years, grants go away pretty quickly, depending on the government that's in control. And so in terms of being sustainable going forward, again, looking at replacing and maintaining existing assets within revenue sources that are more within the city's control, hence reserves. The flip side of that, though, would be directly funding it from tax levy. And again, going back to some earlier comments I made about what may be coming down the line for us, that might be one recommendation that comes forward to council when we do the reserve analysis. If it's a program that is well supported within the community, then there's some good logic and argument to put it directly on the tax levy, so that you collect a certain amount of money up to a certain point, and then it comes off the tax levy, but that money is available to run the program.
Okay.
And my problem with this being that we take 1.6 million out of reserves. We have an ongoing program of 1.6 million a year. Well, it doesn't take too many years of $1.6 million of funding this from reserves before we have no reserves. And unless we're willing to somehow find some sort of revenue to be able to generate that $1.6 million a year, part of the MSI and part of the federal gas tax is to do that. So while I respect the administration's recommendation that reserves is the place to go, I think dangerously depleting our reserves is a bad idea. And I think that we have the grant money. We have lots of grant money. And I think that we can do that and then give administration time to figure out the reserve study and how to fund those reserves and so that they can become sustainable. I think draining our reserves to about half is not the way to go.
Councillor Panama, Stokes, Monko, Swain, Hendricks.
Point taken, Your Worship, but at the same time, I take Mike's recommendation for this fiscal year. Once the reserve study is completed, you may have a different set of recommendation on how to fund various programs, including the one we're on right now. So for this fiscal year, I'm fine taking your recommendation on reserves, subject to your analysis, and you may change recommendations once you do your full analysis on it for this year. But your point's taken. We have to be fiscally aware of it, and I think we are with Mike's direction. I think for this year, I'm fine with how you determine things after you do your reserve analysis.
Councillor Stokes.
Thank you. Did you indicate earlier, just down that you thought that we might be underfunded, our capital reserve was too low? The feeling was that we might have to, for instance, increase the tax levy to replenish capital reserves. I understand you haven't completed the study yet, therefore you can't give me a dollar value. But the general impression was that.
Yeah, take it for what it's worth, I guess. But it's intuition, I guess, looking at some of the things that I've seen in my short time here. I do get the feeling that over a number of years, our reserves are not going to be sufficient for us to have these ongoing programs where we maintain our existing assets. I hope I get proven wrong, through the analysis. I think there's some opportunities. The utility reserve is probably overfunded. And so part of this analysis is shifting dollars from where they currently reside within reserves to where they maybe should be. So looking at it as a complete picture, I mean, the number that I have up here is capital reserves. So I should have made that very clear up front. This does not include mill rate stabilization. This does not include utilities. Utilities is a bigger one where I do again, on pure intuition only, so take it for what it's worth, I do think that there's dollars there that are probably not necessarily needed. How much? I'm not sure. Does it cover off where I think intuitively we're short on the other areas? Maybe not. But we need to do that analysis to come up with a plan to get us from where we are today to where we probably need to be.
I understand. So the feeling is that the utility reserves may be overfunded and the capital reserves may be underfunded, perhaps.
Perhaps.
But we're making a draw of 1.6, as proposed, we're making, and Matt Stewart has referred to, we're making a draw of 1.6 million on the perhaps underfunded reserves.
Yes.
Would that, okay, gut feeling again, would that 1.6 million be enough to take it from underfunded to perhaps okay?
Long term, no. I don't believe it would.
Okay, but then drawing the amount down will, if it is underfunded, will make it even more so.
Definitely point taken. Can I just show the two slides here right after this? So looking at the projection over the next 5 years for capital reserve balances, you see the trend. It's obviously going down. So again, point taken, 1.6 is causing some of this downward trend. This is what we need to correct, though, in terms of the reserve balances and making sure that there's enough funding in those reserves on a go-forward basis. This is based on the projected 5-year capital plan, which, as we all know, is subject to change and a whole bunch of other factors. But this is what it looks like given the information we have today. This is the projected grant balances over the next 5 years. The reason why I wanted to go to these slides is, you know, looking at things in isolation of 1 year, yeah, definitely. I'm making the case and feeling intuitively that there's a challenge within our reserves, and you're seeing grant balances high. If you look at what's going to come forward over the next 5 years, possibly, we're talking multi-use outdoor field, we're talking about an arts facility, we're talking about a number of different projects. Those projects are being funded from grants in this scenario, which is a good problem to have, because in a lot of cases, especially when you're looking at an arts facility, you'd have to go into debt, typically. And we have not done that as a scenario. We are using the grants to do those things. And so, again, I wanted to jump to these slides so that we got a longer term perspective on where things were going. Again, given a certain set of circumstances that we know today around our reserves and around our capital grants. So hopefully that kind of helps and adds to the conversation.
Yeah, I think that helps. The one thing too that I'll add, and then I got Councillor Malkoff and Councillor Hendricks, is that I believe at the budget workshop, you also stated that, you know, in a perfect world, we'd had this reserve study done and had a budget, but we just didn't get there yet. You know, the timing with, you know, your introduction of the organization, the budget timing, just the way things have went, you know, that's how we've got here, right? So just to temper that discussion as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, which also led to your recommendation on, you know, funding the neighborhood renewal, your recommendation of funding neighborhood renewal from the reserves. You know, after we have this study, you know, hopefully we can provide some more clarity on those things as you suggested, Councillor Malkoff.
Yeah, thanks. And really appreciate those two slides. You articulated it very well there in terms of what we're looking at providing for the community. I think everyone, well, maybe I shouldn't say everyone, but certainly I agree that, it's not feasible to be able to keep funding this out of the reserves. I get that. We hear that reserve is going to come back. I would, we talked about this a month ago, but to me, the value of a neighborhood renewal program from, essentially the ring road around in front of Bow Meadow School, if you're really worried about that piece, I would rather forego it for 1 year and push that down the road and keep those reserves if you're really worried about that. But I think we need to keep the regular capital grant balances so that we can execute on the plan that we said we're going to do. We can build these feasibility studies and geotechnical studies. We talked about feasibility study for arts and that sort of thing. And if we don't have the grant balance, then that's when the debt comes in and the concern that we heard earlier tonight about debt rooms. Or I'm with you with regards to concern about just depleting from reserves. It makes me very nervous. Absolutely. Looking forward to seeing the analysis. If we're really worried about it, then maybe we should have a discussion about foregoing that for the year. I know I kind of lost that argument last time. I'll try and reignite that, but maybe one more time. The other piece I'll say in here is there's potentially that $1.5 million that's currently the gas tax that may not need to be there anymore. So that could help us a little bit in here as well. So I think point taken. No one wants to keep funding this because we're gonna drain that pretty quickly here. But I'll throw out, if you're really concerned about it, let's look at the value of doing it. Maybe we forego it for 1 year.
Councillor Andrews.
No, I was ready for the reserve study discussion, so looking forward to that. And once that's done, I think we can make a decision. But until then, we've had sort of a taste of it now. So.
In answer to your question, I'm not in favor of delaying the neighborhood renewal. I think the older communities deserve that attention. And I think putting it off at this point in time, I don't see the reason why we should. I think we need to keep going with that.
Yeah, it'd just be to alleviate the concern of depleting the reserves.
I agree. I don't want to see them going this direction. I think the study is important. But I don't think we're at the point now where we should pick that project not to fund.
Councillor Stowe.
I'm going to agree with Councillor Barnhart. For me, I'm not willing to forego the renewal programme for this year, and I would not vote for that. And to me, the question that Mayor Stewart has raised is, given that, how do we fund it? Do we fund it from reserves or do we fund it from grants?
Well, the flip side of that is if we forwent it this year, we could always double it up and do it next year. Do this year's program and next year's program next year after we got that reserve fund study done. Then we know for sure. But I am really not in favor of taking our reserves to a level that low before that study's done.
I guess my comment to that would be one low, right? Because what we're hearing from administration is they're recommending that we fund it from reserves based on a course look at some of the funds and values that exist, identifying that some may be overfunded and some may be in need of future funding. So what I haven't heard is grave concern for where that study ends up. In my view, if administration had grave concern about funding this, they probably wouldn't have. If administration had grave concern about funding this through the reserves, then they probably wouldn't have suggested that, right? And so that's why I'm going back with the recommendation from administration, because they've had a cursory look at what all the reserves and intuition and feelings play into this a little bit. But when I have intuition and feelings on an environmental concern for a client, people tend to go with that, right? And that's where I'm at, and that's the intuition and feelings around the finances and that I'm willing to go with the recommendation of administration. So that's where I'm at.
And my intuition is that it doesn't take too many $1.7 million ladder trucks, $1 million roofs, ice plants that need to be replaced. Like part of that reserve study is figuring out what our maintenance life cycles and all this equipment is going to be. And if we have to just start doing some major repairs to buildings, like it doesn't take long to deplete that balance. And so I understand what you guys are saying, and I recognize that I am the lone guy in the room pushing for this. And if I lose, that's fine. But before we do the study, my intuition is telling me it's a bad idea to draw it down now until we find out exactly what we're going to have to do.
What I've heard around the room is support for the recommendation that's put forward by administration. So if I'm incorrect in that, let me know. But otherwise, I think we move along. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dollar.
Switching topics slightly here, just looking at fees and charges fairly quickly. This is very high level. They are included as another agenda item for this evening. Just to hit the highlights in terms of fees and charges, there is an annual review process that administration follows and updates the fees and charges schedules. Any changes are based on a few things, one being operational considerations, the other being reasonableness, comparing ourselves to other municipalities in the region. All of the changes that are included within the agenda item this evening are included in the proposed 2020 budget. And as you can see in the agenda, and hopefully you have the red line version where you can see the changes, there are a variety of different types of changes being proposed. So not necessarily all fee increases, there's some wording changes, there's some new fees coming in. And so there is a variety of changes for council to be aware of. In terms of public input, as you probably all know, we did hold 2 open houses after we did the budget workshops. The first one at the Beaumont Community Center on January 29th. The second one, February 5th at Ken Nickel. We had a lot of folks come out. It's been a long time since I've done any open houses in my work, in my past experience. I was pleasantly surprised at the number of people that actually did come out and provide their input. Most of what we heard from the public was centered around the proposed park in Colonial. Baseball diamonds or ball diamonds, just to be more general. And then, there was some one-off comments. There were some comments around debt. A few other things. There's some concerns around some outdoor rinks and pucks that, I think are all considerations for us to think about as we go forward with the budget and some of the projects that we have on the radar. Last slide for this presentation, just with regards to next steps. So after this evening, February 25th, hopefully approval of the 2020 budget by council. Also hopeful of approval of the fees and charges bylaw. If we get through all of that on the 25th, we'd look at coming back sometime in April for a budget amendment. So this will follow the provincial budget and provide any opportunity to update the budget based on implications of the provincial budget, possibly some update on assessment growth, whatever else may come along the way. Following that will be approval of the tax rate bylaw. And then once we get that approved, we'll distribute the tax notices towards the end of May. And then, of course, property taxes due June 30th. So at a high level, that's kind of what the process looks like after tonight's meeting. And that is the conclusion of this presentation. So if there's any other questions from council, we'd be more than happy to answer them.
Any concluding questions on that section, recognizing the next piece will be a deep dive into as deep as we want to make it into the fees. And if there's any questions there, we'll entertain them now. If not, we'll take 10. Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll take 10 here. We'll reconvene at 7:06 or thereabouts. Thank you, Eric.
Good job.
Oh, yeah, I'm giving you that.
Okay, thanks everyone. We'll return to the meeting here. I did have a request from Councillor Daniluk to add one final question to the last piece, just very quickly. Councillor Daniluk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick follow-up question, Mr. Gallagher. In the past, Councilor Swain and myself were part of the committee on the rec building itself, and we negotiated with the county to do a contribution of $2.5 million of capital funding for the actual project, payable $500,000 a year over a 5-year period. I'm curious, if you didn't answer tonight, you let us know at some point. I believe the first $500,000 will be coming in the year 2021, as opposed to this year. When the money does come to us from the county, how is that going to be allocated? I know, does it go into a reserve, go towards paying down the debenture? If not tonight, you can give us an answer at a later time. But I know that that's a substantial amount of capital that we have to do debenture first for the project, and then that be coming after the fact. So we could maybe get a clarification on how the money will be coming to us over that 5-year period, how it will be allocated towards. Could it be a reserve? Could it go to operating or capital? Where will that money actually go?
Yeah, we can certainly get some clarity back out to council, specifically around where the 500 annual payment for the next 5 years is going within the budget. I know we did talk about that, and just off the top of my head, I can't remember where we landed on it, but we can definitely get that information out to council.
No rush. It'd be great to know that. Thank you.
And the upgrading as well on top of that.
Sure.
I want 50 years, which is awesome. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. We'll move on to 904B, draft bylaw 971-20, the 2020 fees and charges. So all yours.
No specific presentation around the fees and charges piece. Again, just to reiterate a couple of points from the previous presentation. It is something administration reviews on an annual basis, typically as part of the budget process. We do look at comparators to the regional municipalities just to make sure that we're in line, taking into consideration some operational aspects of the operations of the city. And again, as I mentioned, within the document and the attachment itself, you'll notice a number of different kinds of changes to the fees and charges schedules. Some of them being increases to the actual fees, some of them some wording changes, and there are some new fees that have been considered as part of the package. And with that, I think I'll just open it up to any questions committee may have. I did, again, just as a reminder, mention previously that what you see in the fees and charges bylaw as changes have been incorporated into the 2020 budget. So if there are any changes committee would like to see, administration will probably need a little bit of time to figure out what kind of impact that would have on the budget going forward.
Great, thank you. So I think in the interest of keeping some order to this and not bouncing forwards and backwards in the document, that we can take the headings and say, in the first section, the planning, development, and building permit fees, if anyone has any questions that they brought specific to that, we can ask them, and then we'll just go down like a blue section at a time, if that sounds reasonable to everyone. So the first section was planning, development, and building permit fees. Does anyone have any questions specific to that section of the document? Councillor Barker.
I can't find it quick enough on here, but I had a question about what's a non-resident business, and is there a difference in the fees? Is that something new, or has that been around for a long time? I just didn't notice it before. Somebody answer the question. It's in planning and development. I just don't know. Page.
Has not changed this year from previous years. A business that's not based here, so if you as the contractor coming in.
Oh, that's what. That doesn't mean if you own a business and you live in Leduc, you pay more. No. it means you're coming through you're doing business. That I remember. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask, are you looking through the RFD document or attachment 2 when you're going down the categories?
What I was suggesting was the
Schedules.
RFP, let me see which one I can. Yeah, page 27 of 68, so 27, so it's kind of broken down into sections there. That was what I was suggesting. If there's a better way to do it, we can do that.
Thank you.
Any more questions on that front piece, Councillor Montgomery?
Yeah, and did you have a question about the fast track piece?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I guess this one jumped out at me. We had a report last week talking about the fast track process and how well it was doing, which is exciting to see. This seems like a pretty significant jump, and I understand the comments that were made off the top about comparing with municipalities and everything like that, but to go, so I'm looking for clarity on the second bullet point down on page 27, fast track residential permit fee increased from $525 to $750. So I won't do any marked out math on the fly, I promise you. But that seems like a significant jump. So I'm just curious if you could speak to that. Like, I assume we're trying to encourage people to go through this process.
There's Danny Kendra up here. She'll speak to it.
Yeah, thank you. Is that similar?
Yeah, no, that's I was going to ask the same question, so that's great.
I see that. Yes, thank you for your question regarding the fast track process. So this is specifically for residential permits, so it wasn't for the signage. It's for new homes. So that is partly why you see that there's a fee increase. It's to cover the staffing. It's also somewhat, they're more time intensive for us to process because we're typically having to chase people down for more information and different things like that. So it's actually requiring more inputs from us in order to actually be able to meet the fast track process, which is why you see that it has had a jump. So it's partly, hopefully, that people would use the normal process, not that we want to, but we can only take so many fast track processes. So
just a follow-up on that then. Sorry, I want to be clear what you just said. Do we want people to go through the fast track, or do we not? And if not, I don't know if we should be using a financial penalty is the wrong word, but incentive. Thank you. To take them away from that. If it doesn't work, then why do we use it? So maybe this is a bigger question, but yeah, does that? Why would we make that jump? If it is to disincentivize folks to take it, then I assume there's a better way to do it.
this is not necessarily to disincentivize, it's a convenience fee. So there's a convenience fee associated with the service that is being offered, so that's part of it. Part of it is to cover the increase in staff time that it does take us to actually be able to process those. When Ms. Dargy was here last week in front of council talking about the land use bylaw, she was talking about how we have fast track processes in terms of signage and everything, but that's when you make a normal application and you're able to meet all these different requirements, then we will fast track it. The fast track residential permit process is a separate one that people pay for and that we administer separately. It's a guaranteed 3-day turnaround time, and it's an enhanced service that we're offering over top of our normal residential permit service. So that's why this one has a slightly increased fee.
Okay, so it's just based on your assessment of how this has gone over the last couple of years or whatever, and notice that this is taking a lot more staff time and we should be charging people more to be able to do that.
That's correct. This process has been in place since last year.
Yeah. Last question on that is if a incorrectly submitted or requires changes, does that negate the 3-day and they have to go back and make the repairs to their submission before the 3-day starts counting? Maybe just if you could comment on that, the quality of the submission, timeline, and the fee.
Thank you. So with the fast track residential permit process, we have the 3-day turnaround time. So that is after the application is deemed to be complete. So if we're still awaiting outstanding information or it's not in sufficient form for us to be able to make the decision, the application is not deemed complete and that 3-day clock does not start. That 3-day turnaround time is for development and building, so it's the whole process. We do combine permits here. So they would essentially be kind of in a holding pattern until they submitted that information. We work with them to have a successful application.
Okay. Thank you. That's my question on that piece. Is any more questions in here? Mayor, you had your hand. Okay. Okay. With that, we'll move into the next section, which was utility services. Just top of the next page there. Does anyone have any questions on the utility services portion here? Seeing none, let's go to the next piece, which was childcare fees. Mayor, followed by Councillor Barnhart.
I do have one question. When we were discussing childcare, we had moved to do business planning process to recover 100%. We only put the fees 2%. Do we know when and how that business planning is going to start to get underway then? And what kind of impact it may have on these fees? Or we're not anticipating that for this year?
Yeah, the business planning process has not begun, and that's why we just did a cost of living increase to hold the line until we can do the proper planning and be able to communicate that.
Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you. Under bus transportation for childcare fees, there is $95 per child, and then I don't understand 2 days a week, Tuesday, Thursday, 3 days a week, Monday, like that just doesn't make sense to me, so I'm looking for some clarifications there.
What page on, sir? What page you on? It's not page 28.
16 of 31 or 48 of 68.
48.
I'm in the detail. It's a red line. It's not a red line, it's in the regular ones. Forgive me for being on the page, but I don't have time to ask the question.
No, we got that.
I have questions about busing, but this doesn't really address that, but it's.
Here it is, page 48 of 63. Is that correct?
So it costs you $485 if you want to take it 2 days a week, or $605 if you want to take it 3 days a week.
Right.
Per year, is that month, a year?
Monthly, it says in the heading above.
95 would be monthly. I just really don't understand.
So I think it says 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, I see that, but this starts off by saying $95 a child.
Yeah, it does say monthly. Maybe to
It's
clarify.
not clear. Could you just get that?
Yeah, I don't know that. Pardon me?
I mean, you pay.
Right, but then the 2 days per week.
If you came 2 days a week, it'd be $45 a month. You went to
Oh, yes. Sorry, okay. Okay.
So 95 for 1 day.
95 is for the bus, so that's how much you pay for the bus. The bus is a private contracted service that
Yeah.
So everybody
the
pays.
LCC and the SAS offer. And so it goes to all the different locations and does individualized drop-off, but it also will take the kindergarten kids at times when other school buses aren't actually running. So it does that, it waits for the kids and it's a whole service, but it can be offered additionally.
Yeah. It's just the way that it's.
So
You have lost me, so
So
I need something.
485, 605 has nothing to do with the bus. So I think we just need to flip those
That's the
around.
monthly fees for childcare,
childcare.
nothing to do with the bus.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're right.
Looking at that right under it and thinking.
Yeah, no,
that
I
makes
we just
no
need to
sense
flip
me.
those around.
Okay,
Childcare.
thank you, Councilor.
That moves us, any more childcare fees? I didn't see any. That moves us to cemetery fees. Does anyone have any questions on cemetery fees?
So back up to page 28 or 29.
Yeah, that is page 28.
I'm getting there. Hang on. No question, I'm just getting there.
Yep.
Follow along.
Cemetery fees. The highlight there is the, the new columbarium and, access to that and high and low and all those kinds of things. So I think it was all pretty straightforward. So,
Cemetery that's south of town, correct?
yep. The next section, which I expect questions, will be the Beaumont Sports and Recreation Center. Whoever wants to go can go. Just raise your hands and then I'll take order and then we'll go. And that's this. If anyone wants to start, then I'll start.
Nobody wants to go, I'll go.
Okay, Mayor, go ahead.
A couple on the VSRCP. 2 questions. One, I noticed with facilities of this type in our neighboring municipalities, there's also log booking fees for organizations that take, say, 30 hours a week over the course of an entire season, they generally run $5 to $10 an hour lower than the one prime rate or non-prime. I was just wondering if we were looking at a block booking fee for organizations that take large blocks of time over the season.
My understanding is we did look at that. However, at this point, we were deferring to the Our Places Play recommendation where we have increased spontaneous activity, and we were concerned there may be a conflict between block bookings taking spontaneous time away. So I think the prudent action at this point would be to open the center and see how it goes. And that was the recommendation, not to do block booking this time.
Okay. Can you run that one past the Beaumont Sports and Rec Council?
That's
Because
an
I know
option.
there's lots of like ice users and soccer people and that are looking for significant amounts of time in those centers. So while I agree that there has to be some spontaneous use and drop in, people predicate running full winter programs on having a certain amount of ice time or a certain amount of field house time or a certain amount of gym time. And I'd like to have another look at block booking for user groups and then scheduling in spontaneous use and things like that.
Just to add on that, I think that one of the pieces of feedback that was brought forward at the Beaumont Sport and Rec meeting was a concern like that as well around municipalities tending towards their own needs, wants, desires before looking after the needs of the block users, and that the perception of that, whether or not it's true or not, is up for discussion. But the perception of that, so so I hear what you're saying. So, Councillor Moncasway, followed by Councillor Barnhart.
Yeah, just to carry on this theme, is there an incentive for a Beaumont? Did we consider looking at an incentive for a Beaumont community group versus an outside group? I can see several teams from South Edmonton wanting to come in and book up the space. I'll use soccer as the example. Have we looked at considering a fee slightly less for a Beaumont groups versus someone coming from outside?
No, that would fall under the allocation policy as to how the booking would go. But we haven't considered that, as far as I understand. I don't see it in here, so.
Yeah, okay, let me ask it a different way. Have we asked the user groups what they're prepared to, what would they can pay for this? Have we gone to them and said, look, we're anticipating X, I don't have the number in front of me, per hour. What is that going to do for your fees for your kids that are playing in your sport?
I can't speak to if all the user groups have been spoken to. I know that soccer, for example, has been around that, so it's an ongoing conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you. I see the rates here for the youth and the daily admission, and size 50 is not too bad, but I have been encouraged by some of the youth that I know to make that as affordable and a one-shot deal as possible, because that idea of having a place where you can go and drop in without planning ahead is really attractive to them, and I'd rather see them doing something like this than where else can they, hang out kind of thing. But to go there and actually do something that's constructive and good for their health. I don't know if this $5.50 is what others are charging, or whether we can make that even more. Maybe it's advertising it and promoting it, but even the 50 cents, just dropping that and making it $5 even might be more attractive. And I know that's even right, the 10 visit pass, because that brings it down. But I think encouraging them to do that drop in at certain times would be really a good thing for the youth in our community. So
Just looking to admin here, there's two tables here. Just if you can describe the difference between these two tables. Yeah, I believe the top one was the during construction rates.
That's correct. The top
And
one.
the bottom is going to be post-construction
That's
rates,
correct.
right?
And I can share with the committee that we have looked at different communities and facilities. comparables, Fort Sask, St. Albert, Bonnyville, Leduc, City of Edmonton, Medicine Hat, and our fees here are right in kind of the median, if you will, not the high end, not the low end, so we're very consistent with what we're seeing out there.
In terms of changing budget or losing revenue, I mean, in that kind of a drop-in rate, there's something of it, if you have it low enough, you get more. So I know that we had a similar conversation way back when with the super senior one. Having one more person there, you know, from an area that we want to, or from a demographic that we want to encourage, is good for them, good for us in the long run. So I don't know if the rest of council would consider maybe dropping that daily admission for the youth to $5. I'd really like to leave it where it is at $5. I don't know what the uptake is on it now, have no idea, but it seems to me going to the $7.14 is gonna, can't even advertise that well. $5, $5.
But on that same vein, if you were to take the youth and drop it to 5, children 3 to 12, 6, 19, that you'd want
I mean,
to drop that too, right? You're gonna be
I'm forgetting that sporadic use because it encourages people to come eventually and take out the membership. I don't know what the budget impact will be. None of us do because we don't know how many people will take us up on it.
Yeah, and that's part of the challenge here, where I know the staff did a lot of work on building this, and it's, a lot of it is based on a report we had done a few years ago on the operational cost of the building. And so it's best guess at this point as to what the turnout for some of this stuff's gonna look like, and I think come 21, we'll have a better picture of what our attendance is, and we may have to adjust on the fly. That's why it's an annual.
I don't know how to go about this, but I would propose that we make it $5 for the youth and talk about the children if you want. But at this point, I think it's a bit of a part of the expression crapshoot because we don't know how many people are going to take us up on it.
So you have the mayor, then Sam, and then I'll comment. Mayor?
Well, I wasn't going to comment on this, but I'm still thinking about it.
Okay.
Question, but
Okay, maybe we'll just stay on this vein here. So, Councillor Markov Swain, and then I'll.
Yeah, I'm with Councillor Barnhart. I mean, I got all the right numbers, but I'd hate to spend $29.5 million on a facility that can't be used by our community. And I can't be, maybe is a little subjective, but yeah, that we want to incentivize participation in as much as possible. So I'll be interested in that discussion as well. I appreciate there's a lot of math and science that's going on behind this, and for us to pick a number may be a little bit unfair to that process. So I don't know if picking a number is the right place to do this, but you know, 7.14 for a youth, they're not going to drop in. I mean, we get to have a description of what this all includes. I can't see anything here for climbing walls, so I assume that includes that, includes the pool, includes all that sort of thing. So if we considered, so I guess in short, yes, I think we should have that discussion. I would be supportive of reducing that to encourage folks. But have we considered options for if they just want to, and apologies if it's already in here, but if they just want to go and play basketball, badminton or whatever, then there's a set fee. You don't have to, if they're no intention of going to the pool. I know that can be tough to manage from a logistical perspective, but are there different options that we can provide that could potentially shrink that down?
But potentially, that drop-in would give you access to that spontaneous activities that is not programmed, for sure. $5, just for an example, I could just pull here. So Fort Sask is $5.25. Leduc is showing $6. City of Edmonton, $7. Medicine Hat, $6.90. St. Albert's, $8. Bonnyville says 4 to 7, so I'm not quite sure why it says that. So I think that, you know, $7 is right in that sweet spot there, but if $5 is what council wants, it does have a cascading effect though, because if you change the youth, then you have to make the child drop down and everything else.
I guess my point is that if I'm a youth or anyone, just want to go in and play basketball, and no intention to go to the pool or the gym or the climbing wall.
That would be the drop-in fee.
So basically you're paying for, and I don't know how you figure this out, but you're paying for the full suite of services, but you're only going to use a portion of it.
Potentially, but when you go in the building, you've got access to a few things, so you might change what you do 5 minutes later.
So again,
maybe I'm not understanding your question.
Go swimming.
Yeah.
Police this. Yeah, then you got.
Yeah, lifeguard seat, got a red band on.
So I think this is the proverbial running a rec facility conundrum that's in front of us here, because the logistics around purple, red, blue, which day of the week, whose fell off, whose didn't, it just becomes so hard to to manage. It's not insurmountable, I wouldn't say, but you probably look to some technology to help do that, and I don't know that we've budgeted for that.
But you put a turnstile on every facility, on every
I don't-
feature.
I don't know how much a $2 difference is gonna persuade or dissuade somebody from going to that facility. Like,
Psychological.
it's just, like, I got 4 kids, and honestly, the $2 is not gonna sway me one way or the other, because I will then plan to go do whatever.
With all due respect, I'm not thinking of the adults, I'm thinking of the youth that might drop by. And I think that it's psychological for them in terms of how much it is. 714 is like a turn off in terms of, that just seems like really outdated in terms of the fee, give me $5 and I'm going there kind of thing, so.
If there's been a bunch of science done behind this, let her ride for 6 months and see what happens.
So I put some time in this afternoon here, and I made a comparison, and what I compared was just the drop-in fee, just the daily admission fees for what's proposed, what we did during construction, what the legacy was, and the facilities that I know that our residents are going to in absence of ours, which is LRC Leduc, Meadows, and some are going as far as Wetaskiwin. So what that came together here for me was that our adult rate at $9.95 and our child at $6.19 are the highest in the region around where our residents are going in absence of our facility being open. This is one of the conversations that I brought forward during the campaign around user fees, and it was very, very animated in the community around what do you get for what you pay for, and that's the proverbial thing you have to look at. So you also have to look at, as Mr. Suter said, when you pay that fee, what do you get when you're inside, right? And do you get 7 things at one place and access to 10 at the other, and 8 at the other, and 5 at the other? And there's a real weighing that goes there. The one thing that I note at $9.95 is I wonder in the region who's playing chicken with the $10. Who's going to break that $10 mark first? Because if you talk about a psychological barrier, I think that's it. And we're only 5 cents away from there. So I would suggest that the $9.95 is high. The child is high by 19 cents compared to our Aquafit legacy, but a child at $6.19 right now. A child in Leduc is $4.50. A child in the Meadows is $5.75, and a child in Wetaskiwin is $4.25. And so we're at $6.19 there, right? So I think that although looking at Bonnyville and all these other places is great, but I focused my search on where are people going in absence of our facility being open, and that's the comparison I did. So. I don't know if we want to how we want to approach this, because if we start throwing darts and numbers tonight, it's going to get pretty messy. I'm at the point with this piece here, without us even wholly getting into it, of saying, admin, let's have another look at this and see where things are at around this box that's in front of us right now, compared directly to the facilities. If people didn't go to Beaumont's facility, where would they go? Let that be the comparison. So I'll stop there. I got Councillor Benlock and then Councillor Stout.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I like the idea of the youth drop and give the youth somewhere to go. I think it has a lot of merit to that. I also appreciate the amount of work into this, Mr. Suter, and the staff have done this. It's a lot of work. Again, I appreciate that, being on the CCVC committee and trying to figure out room rates and so on. I understand completely. It's unfortunate, though, at this point, if we could not have an idea how many youth are actually using it versus super seniors or seniors, to get an idea on population. For example, if there's only 25 youth who dropped in last year to use it, it's kind of a moot point. But then if the price is cheaper, more might come. I get that argument totally. And these also have to include GST on top of these prices too, right? You have to tack on GST to these as well. So some idea of actual youth population use based on these categories could be somewhat helpful.
The other piece to consider is, this is an additional complex, so you've got other things that might draw more people. So it's hard to read that currently and see, now we have a gymnasium there. We didn't have that before. We've got a larger fitness center. You've got the traditional pool that was there. Then you've got a walking track. So that's going to draw more in. You've got spontaneous use in the field house. There's lots of things so it's hard for us to really be sure what the numbers are going to look like until it opens.
And to your point too, Steve, about where are they going? Remember we were talking to some of the people at the Sports and Rec Association before we got the pull the trigger on the new rec center, they were saying, you know, if I increase my tax $100 to not have to drive to Thornby for 2 practices, that's my gas right there. So question is, if you could spend $8 at Millennial Place or $9 here, what they save in gas alone and time, it's worth an extra buck coming here. At the same time, where's that high? Where's that number that's not coming here? I get that argument. It's like chasing your tail sometimes, but I don't think $9.95 is too far off the mark. A little lower will always be better, of course, but I don't think we're too far off the mark. People having less travel time and less gas and convenience to be able to come to our facility. So just a little food for thought on that point.
Okay, I go to Councillor Stowe.
Thank you. I agree that this, I don't think we can hash this out now. I think this does need to be, I'd like to take another look at this before I'm content that these are the appropriate rates to be set in particular, I'm thinking, I agree as well that we have to be competitive with the places where people might, the other places where people might choose to go. And speaking from experience, for me, because I do it, that's Leduc, and I know a lot of other people do it too. And don't think I can really compare with Millennium Place or Meadows because they're much bigger facilities with a lot more on offer. I'm not sure that's a valid comparison, but I'd suggest that we need to be competitive with Leduc because it's a similar sort of facility and in size, and that's also while we've been closed, that's actually where we've been explicitly sending people or recommended people to go, or one of the places. So I'd be very inclined to position it initially that maybe we should peg it at or below the Leduc rates. I'd also had a couple of observations. One is that if we drop the youth rate to, as has been discussed, to $5, then as has also been discussed, there's a cascading effect, one of which would be the 10 visit pass as well, right? You wouldn't pay $64 or whatever it is. Is it 64? Yes, you wouldn't pay $64 for 10 visits if you could get 10 individual visits for 50. So there is a cascade effect. And another observation, I'm curious as to how we arrive at $7.14. Does that tell me that everybody's paying electronically then? Because nobody can pay by cash $7.14 because...
Plus GST. I'm just saying, yes.
Well, there isn't it's not legal tender these days, but then why set it to $7.14? Are we adding 5% to that? But even that doesn't come up to a round amount.
That's the number without the GST. So if you put the GST in, it would be $7.50.
It'd be $7.50 after GST.
Yeah, I think I came up with
I did the same thing. Let that ring a bell, yeah.
Okay. But all right. But on that subject, and I agree with the $9.95 one as well. Let's either make it $10 or decide we don't want to go to $10 and make it $9.50.
I'll sneak a comment in and then Councillor Muckhoff-Swain. So another way that LRC has dealt with this is they've, specifically to some of what Councillor Barnhart's concerns are, is they've put in the active 8s and 9s, and it's a program for grade 8s and grade 9s to get a free membership to the LRC and the Alexander pool, for instance. They've also purchased a Wibbit, and a Wibbit is one of those structures you see out on the lake that pieces together and you pay your fees and go jump around it. So the Leduc pool puts one in Friday nights for 2 hours, and if you want to see teenagers come to a pool, that's where you go see, and they flock and there's lineups and that's what draws them in, right? So there may also be some ways to attract some of the folks that might not otherwise go to save their couple bucks and not buy a Slurpee and then come and jump on the Wibbit on a Friday night, right? Or the active 8s and 9s to say, hey, mom and dad, I get it. So there may be an opportunity there outside of this fees and charges to be a little bit more creative to get some numbers in. Councillor Muckhoff-Swain.
Most importantly, adults allowed to jump on that thing?
Maybe you, but not me.
Good answer. I support the idea of pulling this out. I don't think it has a direct impact. We're not opening for a while here, so I think we've got time to figure this out, and I'd like the deeper dive. My point that I made a bit earlier stands that I don't want to spend $29.5 million on a facility and not have it open, so not have it available to folks and potentially outprice them. So I'd like to start at the Leduc rates and see where that takes us. Obviously, you're going to have to do some analysis of what that means for the operational piece. The last plug I wanted to have is I asked for this in our workshop, but when we were first discussing and debating whether we're going to approve this or not, we had looked at a usership, how much of that field house and how much of that ice time would take up. We kind of said I think it was like 80% for ice time and even less for the field house, and so I'd be curious on where that analysis is at in terms of, now that we've got the fee for what we think it's going to cost to go in there, are we still anticipating, based on our operating budget, are we still anticipating that being 80% full from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. type thing, or are we anticipating that a bit larger? I'd just be curious on where that analysis went, because I remember asking a lot of questions around that at the time, because capital is one thing, but we got to make sure we maintain it from an operating perspective. So when you come back with this, if you could just provide some of that analysis on what we anticipate, particularly those two sites. I think the gymnasium is going to be, and the gym is going to be a little bit more difficult for those particular two ones. Does that won't ring a bell for you because you weren't given that discussion? But
I think I know what you're talking about.
yeah. Okay, but in general, support. Let's take this out. I think we've done this before. We just take this section out of the user fees discussion. We can continue on and approve everything except this potentially.
Okay, yeah, I'll look for more support around that momentarily. Councillor Hendricks, you're up next.
Yeah, in the past, we, as council, would default to the LRC. We'd stress test our amount to the LRC and see how competitive we are. That was basically the sum total. So that was also with the various user groups with ICE and all the rest. What's LRC's rates? What's our rates? That's how we always match up to it. So I'd say we do a stress test against that, see how we
Okay, I said 3 support right now for pulling it out and doing a little more work. Any more support for that? 4?
I'm good with that, thank you.
5. So I think we have this. Yeah, I think we have the support we need to pull that piece out. I still want to have some more discussion on the rest of the BSRC's fees, but
Which piece we're pulling out?
yeah. So this.
We pull out the whole schedule, and then it comes back here.
So that includes field house and everything else?
Yeah, is that the easiest way to do it? Administration Schedule 9 would be pulled out then?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
We pull the whole schedule, not just the term.
Okay, sounds good.
Even if the rest of the schedule is 100% correct, it's still processed out.
Perfect. So that's what direction from the committee would be to pull that and look at LRC and the facilities that our users would be attending in absence of our facility right now. Stress test that. As I said, breaking the psychological $10 barrier for an adult to go is a tough pill to swallow. Yeah, let's see where it ends up, right? Councillor Daniluk, and then we'll move down the schedule.
Yes, thank you. One quick question, Mr. Suter, on the Schedule 9 itself with the new rec center, I'm not seeing, unless I saw it and didn't see it in my head, the rock climbing wall, can that be rented as a separate entity? Or did I miss it here on the list of the various field house, room rentals, aquatic and so on? Did I miss the rock climbing wall?
We put out a tender for a private contractor to run the climbing wall, so there's no fees on it.
Okay, good. So it's on the radar, but it's not part of the Schedule 9. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mayor, you're up.
Okay, that leads me to another question. So if a private contractor runs the rock climbing wall, do I get access to the rock climbing wall with my drop-in fee?
No. Well, the details have not been worked out. Initially, no. We'll wait and see if we get a contractor and a signed agreement and see what that looks like from their fee structure. There's a potential to package something for sure.
Okay, and my next question would be, I was flipping through and I noticed the ice rates are cheaper than we're charging on the Ken Nickel. Is there any reason why we're charging different?
They should be the same.
There are discrepancies between Ken Nickel and BSRC.
Our intention is to be the same.
Okay, cool. That's all I wanted. That was my last question.
Yeah, I noted that, and I think Councillor Monkhouse did too.
I was triggered by the climbing wall. To go back to it. So we, City of Beaumont, invested and we paid for that. And now a private contractor potentially is going to take that and run their business out of that. And so there's going to be an additional cost on top of that, what you're saying. So I'll pay $9.95 to get in, but to use the climbing wall, I have to then pay another fee on top of that to a private contractor.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah, we still need to flesh that out.
Okay,
Makes the most sense.
I'll leave it there.
Councillor Dunlop?
Thank you. On that vein, if you don't mind, just a quick moment, when we talked about the design of the rec center going back, the early part of our term, or you've already to proceed with the rec center, we talked about the rock climbing wall being a very innovative part of it. You know, I remember asking the question at one point before your time, Mr. Suter, and joining us, is that we would have city staff trained and qualified to actually run the rock climbing wall. And that was going to be part of our understanding. So this idea of a private contractor is a bit of a surprise for me personally. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but I'm just wondering about that versus having our own staff actually being qualified to look after that part of the facility. So, thank you.
And just to comment on that, what we're looking at is the most effective way to deliver that service. So
Yes.
there's a whole bunch of things that will come into play. It may be a private contractor, it may be in-house that we haven't got there yet.
Okay.
Yeah, look forward to updates on that part. Thank you. Just walking down Schedule 9 there, the walking track membership, just looks like the intent on that is that you can pay for a one-time, whatever that fee may be, or you can do a month or an annual on that. I'm assuming that's a model that other facilities are using then?
I understand it is, yes.
Working towards a
If you just want to
demographic,
use that.
because we don't have a big mall to walk in, so,
Right.
yeah. Okay, thank you. Any more questions on Schedule 9 here for anyone that is pulled forward?
It's going to come back.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, anything right now. The only other discrepancy that I had noticed was the ice times, and that was brought forward. Okay, going once, going twice. Okay, that takes us, so the next section in the blue takes us to the CCBCC now. You know, it says there's been a slight increase of approximately 5% to home rentals to include AV with each rental. Seems reasonable. Any other questions on that for anyone? Indoor and outdoor facility, the changes up there. Any questions on that? I think it's pretty straightforward. Protective services, any questions on this? I think these are in place based upon more realistic costs is what it looks like as you look through the changes. So, okay, Councillor Monkhouse, followed by the Mayor.
Yeah, and maybe the mayor should go first because he knows a hell of a lot more about this than I do. But it just, again, without having any context around this, some pretty significant jumps. So I'll look at kind of third bullet point down, increase from 400 to 625 per hour, from 200 to 350 bucks an hour. So I don't have a specific question, but I wonder if someone could just speak to the thinking behind this, to why we would look at such a dramatic increase for this.
Page lost you.
Sorry.
28 and 29.
Page 29.
I'm on the bottom of top of page 29. Fire responses, standby, administration. Just without knowing anything about it, it just seems like a very significant jump.
During the past several years, we've actually been raising our fee schedule to align us with the provincial standard, which is actually the provincial road builder rates. In absence of us having our own rates, we've had to apply the provincial rates. The breakdown from a flat rate to an hourly is, in some of these cases, you'll notice it's not consistent across the whole fee schedule, was to make it user-friendly and, in fact, more economical for residents and business so that they'll actually reach out and call us as opposed to just avoiding and going ahead and doing their own thing or not getting inspections and so on and so forth. A lot of the inspections are between 1 and 1.5 hours, so we looked at the notion of having a flat rate. So what do you do? That you make that 2 hours, you need to cover the costs, and we felt that was a case of gouging, and we didn't want to do that. So we've, most cases have gone to a straight hourly rate. But the short answer to that is that the task here is to get us up to the provincial standard. And more detailed questions, I can certainly get more information for you.
Yeah.
Mayor?
Yeah, I'm just traveling down the same vein. And not necessarily so much in terms of the hourly charge for the truck and the guys, because that's pretty much based on the provincial schedule, but more in terms of permitting and inspections and for special events and things like that. I know, like, if you look at the rest of our planning and development fees, they're flat charges. And they're easy to budget on. Now I got an hourly charge coming from one department in the city of Beaumont. So, and I recognize that we don't want to necessarily take an hour and a half and just charge them for what we charge them. But the reality is, with the rest of our fees, we sort of took an average and we either win or we lose. We either spend a little bit of time and make a lot of money, or we spend a lot of time and lose a bunch. Hopefully, most of the time we hit the median. I can see doing a lot of work. Like, from a guy that's trying to plan events and do things, like, it's hard for me to budget on, well, what if I as a builder, plot my plans down, I think it should take you, it costs $85 as it takes 1 hour, and then you send me a bill for 4. So a little hesitant that when we're looking at like permit fees and inspection fees for special events and things that are known quantities that we sort of quantify, that we're charging hourly fees. Just in that perspective. So that would be my one concern that I would ask you to make. Not necessarily, I'm okay with $85 an hour, but just how do we define how many hours it should take to do a service? And how do we be transparent about that?
Yep.
And just in response, and you brought the point up, and we should have communicated that we have reviewed the regional rates, and these rates are aligned with similar municipalities as well. As far as your comment about flat rate versus hourly, that's a decision that our protective services folks have made. They've looked at their typical inspections are running about 2 hours, more than 2 hours, depending on the size of the type of inspection, the investigation, additional time is usually needed. This is, we feel, is a bit more accurate way to charge it. You're right, you could just be with a flat rate. So this is just the route that we've decided to go.
Anyone else have any questions in there before we
I
talk?
support the mayor in that.
For sure, yeah.
Having run special events.
Yeah, let me come back to that piece there, but does anyone have any other questions in there? Councillor Daniel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. I thought Mr. Cook might be here this evening, but he's not. So he's the expert in this area, I think, for our municipality. But on page 29, the top of where it says fire responses and standby, engine ladder, tenders, rescue, danger, and so on down the list. When those fees are charged, I'm assuming they're charged to probably the insurance company who's covering off the event that happens, right? It's not to our individual citizens. That's my understanding, right? Many people will read that and think, well, if I have a fire in my house, I'm being charged by the city. You're not being charged by the city. That's the fees we charge to insurance companies to respond to that particular event. That's my understanding. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Just people read it don't realize that it's not being charged individually have fire services. They're being charged to the insurance companies. Thank you very much.
Split hairs, insurance companies don't want to get one either.
Oh, I'm not saying they are. I'm just saying people have to clarify that these fees are not being charged to our citizens.
Yeah.
It's being for having a fire. It's charged to.
That if you have a fire at your home,
Should be home insurance.
you're not going to be handed a big charge.
We're not going to be like the city of Edmonton. We're not going to be making the news because somebody sent somebody a big bill.
Yeah, I know. I'm just making a point of clarification.
No, it's
There should be a home insurance, right? If you don't have home insurance, well, yeah.
So if we look back to the mayor's comments there and look, we have, an instance of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, kind of, if we looked at the per hour rates in the first, what would that be, 10, one before, in schedule 14, is that would satisfy what you were speaking to, Mayor? If you could scroll up, whoever's in charge there, just scroll up a little bit, please.
Just
Just across those 2 pages right there. Yeah. So schedule 14, so the new fee and the special event, the increase in fees. So all those per hour rates there in those sections, that's what you're referring to?
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to. I'm not necessarily referring to the fact that we're charging for them. I'm just referring to the fact that there's a variable.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me like argument.
Okay.
We know it takes 2 hours on average, then why not make it 2 times that amount?
So is there an appetite from council to have administration have a look at that? Min, was there?
Well, the comment I was going to make was just to
Yeah.
what I added was these inspections and the services are dependent on the type. You know better than I do. So it's not all over taking 2 hours. So what we're suggesting is let's charge what it takes. It's an hour and a half, we'll charge you an hour and a half. It's 4 hours, we'll charge the bigger client 4 hours.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to get at, rather than just say flat rate, 2.5 hours, and if it only takes an hour and a half, we just got caps.
Personally, I'm an hourly guy, and I liked seeing this because then you only get charged what it took, right? You know, there's another side to this, which is, you know, the budgeting side and such. So,
That could get taken care of by just putting a communications pamphlet with it saying average inspection takes this much time. If these conditions are met.
yeah, that would be one way. Councillor Stowe.
Oh, thank you. All I was going to say was in response to, yes, the average inspection for this particular case takes 2 hours, so that's what we charge, which is fine on average, but then that means the person whose inspection takes 1 hour is paying the 2 hour fee and is subsidising the person who takes 3 hours because they're going to pay the 2 hour fee as well.
And that's why we took that philosophy to right-size that.
Yes.
And that was the philosophy behind hourly versus flat rate.
So that's the reason for going around it rather than a one-size-fits-all, which is what a flat fee is. And I understand it's much easier to calculate when I'm doing my budget for what this is going to cost me. Yes, and I don't know. Am I a 3 hour or 1 hour? I haven't a clue.
And I was thinking special events. I was not so much thinking fire inspections in large buildings versus small buildings. I mean, I hadn't taken my thoughts to that level.
No.
So, you know, in response to what I heard, special events can be a real pain if you don't know how long it's going to take if you're doing this for the first time ever and you're a volunteer. It's like,
Well, in investigations, I would leave it outrageous because those can drag out, like, depending on, this can be complicated and don't get out by the time you've done your investigation, talk to such license. But things like plan reviews and building inspectors, like, we have a sliding scale for bids from residential homes right up to large commercial structures in the rest of our planning. So I don't know, it's just a different philosophy. If everybody's comfortable, then fine.
Yeah, so I'll just propose that we'll leave it as was. Is there anyone opposed to that? And we'll leave it at the hourly.
Do you have any appetite for the special events one? Is that really a variable? Does that?
I think the variable becomes in the event. Whether it's
There's so many facilities in our city that again, I'm not sure what, the only one I can think of at this point is the CCBCC because we've not done it anywhere else.
So you're referring to the special event inspection fee?
It says $85 now.
Well,
Yeah, but it could be, it could be for a hot dog roast, or it could be for Beaumont Blues and Roots, or it could be for a New Year's party in the CCBCC, any, right? So to try and find a one size fits all, there's gonna be pretty tough, right? So, yeah. So I'll propose that we, let this ride and try out these, hourly rates and look for any input back from administration. The one novel idea I did hear is, perhaps in some communications, there could be average times or something like that could be put out. We'd have to leave that with administration to figure out where that might be appropriate or not. For year-over-year events, they should know what that is and should be able to work it with administration and figure out what the amount it will be close to for budgeting. So, yeah, anyone opposed to just leaving it as $8 per hour here?
No.
Okay. Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next section here, and which is the last on the chart here, which is Kovic. New space with new rates, getting full. I don't know that there's a whole bunch of discussion on this one, but. Perfect. I think that's great and going just as we had all hoped. So,
just a question.
Question from Councillor Barnhart.
I get the names of these memberships are just kind of levels and medium, et cetera. The one I didn't quite understand is corporate identity. So what does that mean?
So if they wanted to have a name and be recognized as a partner in the facility, so not a sponsor, but just a name, so it would be on a table, it would be in the kitchen, have a logo, sort of a branding on it.
And it's a monthly.
know who thinks of the names.
I think we need to back up actually. When we asked to omit the Schedule 9, I just, as I was scrolling through here, realized that the ice times are not just on 9, so we'll have to have Schedule 11 is the Ken Nickel fees and charges, so we'll have to take Schedule 11 to have a closer look at, and Schedule 12. There's inconsistencies between those two.
Yeah, I don't think we need to take them out of the bylaw.
No. It's for administration to have a look. Yeah. Just to be clear, I guess, with the direction on that. Okay. Any more questions? Otherwise, we'll wrap up that section of our meeting here tonight. Brings our presentations and delegations to a close, and looking for a motion to go in closed session. So moved. Councillor Stout, all in favor? We'll take 5 and reset the room. Thank you.